really brief intro, and then we'll just get started on the talk. So, this is the Marxism and Politics Demo Lecture Series, as many of you know, and we're really excited to have you this year. The idea of this series developed out of our Marxism and Politics reading group, which for the past year and a half has been reading foundational texts in Marxist theory and history. And throughout the summer, we've invited political analysts and writers to Philadelphia to give seminars on important socialist topics or historical moments from the left. And these lectures have will cover and have covered a variety of topics, but they share a common historical materialist lens by which to understand and analyze political struggles on the left. And ahead of the talks, we've had the opportunity to read some of the texts that our speakers have assigned. Often, many of them will have written the texts themselves. And so our Marxism and Politics reading group met 2 weeks ago to discuss Oskar Lange's piece, which Dan kindly suggested that we read. And the last lecture, for those of you who couldn't make it, was Renee Rojas talking about democratic efforts in Latin America. And next week, we're going to have Dr. Usmani talk about mass incarceration. So like I said, there's a real variety of what we're covering, but the idea is that we're using a particular lens in which to understand history and political struggles. So tonight, Dan is going to be talking to us about socialist planning and what a socialist economy might actually look like. Marx was pretty critical of socialists who wanted to write recipes for the cookshops of the future, but after several socialist experiments in fully planned economies, mixed market economies, cooperative economics, and everything in between, socialists can draw some lessons from what worked, what didn't, and what the future of socialist planning might be. So after Dan's lecture, we'll have a good chunk of time to really open it up and discuss. And I'm going to ask some questions that the Marxism and Politics reading group came up with. But then after that, we really want to make this a discussion and make it pretty informal. So excited to hear your thoughts on this topic. So I'll introduce Dan. So Dan, please. Okay, great. Joined the socialist movement when he was 15. Answered a classified ad on the back page of The Nation. He's been involved in the labor movement for the past 20 years. First as a student labor activist, and then a telephone operator, and then a staffer at Teamsters for a Democratic Union. He's currently a database administrator and software developer at the New York State Nurses Association. And with that, Dan, I'll let you take it away. We're really excited to have you.
Thank you so much for inviting me today to speak about planning under socialism and market socialist ideas. Like Brianna said, I became a socialist when I was 15, and when I was 15, I thought a lot about how planning would work under socialism. And I basically came to the conclusion that there would be 2 giant buildings. And in one building, there would be all the planners. And in another building, there would be all their computers. And together, those planners and those computers would figure everything out. And that's also the purpose of the new book. And I basically held that view kind of unchallenged for many years until Vivek Shiver wrote an article in Jacobin called The Road to Power, or Our Road to Power, which said we need to kind of critically examine the history of central planning in socialist economies and look at their real failures and consider alternatives. And so I kind of took that as a starting point to try to do that. And so over the last year and a half, I've worked my way through some of the materials from those debates. I started with Alan Nove's Economics of Feasible Socialism, which I highly recommend as an introduction. I just read Oskar Lange, which I know some of you read. And now I've made my way to Vladimir Bruch, The Market in the Socialist Economy, a very interesting book written by a Polish central planner in 1964 in a debate in the Polish Communist Party about the role of markets in the Polish economy. So, I'm an amateur at this. I found it very rewarding, though, to actually kind of consider how a socialist economy would work. And it turns out that even though none of these books are like on, even the socialist bestseller list, I think there's a lot of good material in here for us to grapple with. As Brianna said, socialist thinkers have long told us not to spend too much time planning out how a socialist economy will actually work. Here's what one current candidate for the DSA National Political Committee, how she answered her question of what socialism means to her and what it would look like. I see the question of how to get to the end of capitalism, socialism, as an open one which requires mass participation to answer. Period, the end. I think that try telling that to a busy working person you're trying to recruit to our movement. Try telling that to a skeptical relative who's asking you, well, how's this going to work? That's not going to cut it. Those of us who fight for socialism, I think, have an obligation to really sketch out how we think it will work, even if we're open to our ideas being proven wrong by history or by the masses. And we've now accumulated as a movement 7 decades of experience with planning socialist economies, and the results, unfortunately, were mixed to bad. My conclusion from my beginning study of this is that I don't think the faults of the Soviet planning were solely the result of the authoritarianism of the Soviet regime. And part of my goal tonight is to start to disentangle some of the causes of the failures of the Soviet system that were caused by Stalinism from failures that were caused by the over-centralization of planning the economy. I do still think we need a planned economy. Capitalism and the capitalist market cannot meet the basic needs of most working people, and it can't solve the climate crisis, it can't solve the healthcare crisis. Thankfully, we do not have an either-or choice between anarchy and a command economy. There can and must be room in a planned economy for decentralized decision-making, for consumer choice, for worker choice, and for the nicer things in life. So now let's take a look at the Soviet economy and how it developed in some detail. The development of the classic command economy that you may have learned about in microeconomics textbooks was not planned. It developed out of a series of political crises and the Bolsheviks' response to those crises. The Soviet economy did make very significant achievements. From 1930 to 1940, the Soviets built an industrial economy. They went on to almost single-handedly defeat the Nazis. By 1949, they built their own atomic bomb. By the end of the 1950s, it appeared that Soviet economic growth was finally going to let them catch up with the West. By 1961, Yuri Gagarin was circling the Earth, and Khrushchev was bragging, "We will bury you. We will surpass the economic output of the West." The Soviets made huge gains in expanding literacy and expanding healthcare to millions of people. But of course, we know the Soviet economy faced persistent problems. Millions died in the process of forced collectivization and in the later party purges. The workers who built the dams, the steel mills, the coal mines, the subways, and the new cities lived in very poor housing and faced severe shortages of food and clothing and worked under authoritarian conditions that made any idea of workers' democracy a pure sham. But I don't think all of the problems of the Soviet economy were just a lack of democracy in that system. Some of them did arise from a lack of any kind of decentralized method of decision-making that I think we would have to grapple with even in an economy that was run democratically. So when the Bolsheviks took power, they did not intend to immediately move towards the abolition of capitalism and towards the seizure of the means of production. Instead, while they waited for revolution to break out in Germany, they would expand worker supervision of production, they would institute an 8-hour day, they would carry out a whole host of social reforms, they would give the land to the peasants, they would not move to immediately nationalize all heavy industry in Russia. So that was the plan in October of 1917. By July of 19, all of that was in shambles. The capitalists who still owned the factories in Russia and the technicians who ran them sabotaged production. Civil war was starting to break out. The Bolshevik coalition partners in government, the left socialist revolutionaries, decided to assassinate the German ambassador and start their own insurrection against the Bolsheviks. And most ominously, the peasantry, having just taken the land for themselves, decided to stop sending grain to the cities. So the cities faced imminent starvation. What developed haphazardly was a system that came to be known as war communism. The Soviet government, through a series of decrees, nationalized factories, nationalized small workshops, eventually nationalized 10,000 one-person-run windmills in the countryside, and took over the day-to-day management of almost all production and distribution in the Soviet society. To feed the cities, the government sent armed bands of workers into the countryside to physically requisition grain from the peasants and bring it back. It was a very desperate situation. 7 million people died in the Russian Civil War. Despite being surrounded by famine and death and destruction and a ruined economy, some Bolsheviks started to think that this crisis, though, was actually a good thing, and that it might give them a chance to jump over these boring transitional periods of socialism to full communism. They thought that since money was practically worthless and the Bolsheviks were printing money as fast as they could, that maybe we could move to a moneyless economy right away. And since the only way to hold things together was for people to issue orders all the time, maybe we had moved past the phase where there was any kind of need for kind of like a transitional market. But that was just a dream. Alec Nove said that the economy was really just a few thousand leather-jacketed commissars staying up all night, just basically killing themselves to make sure everything worked. And it just was, the situation grew more and more desperate. Somehow, miraculously, through enormous sacrifice, the Bolsheviks won the Civil War in 1921. And there was a big debate in the party about what was next. And the Bolshevik leadership eventually decided that the country needed a break. And the result of that was the next phase of Soviet economic development, what's called the new economic policy. If you ever watched, did anybody ever watch the show Northern Exposure that was on like 20 years ago? You remember the episode where there's they go back in time and show the role that Sicily, Alaska played in Lyndon deciding to enact. It was totally made up history. But the new economic policy had some important elements. First of all, the whole idea was give the peasantry a break. Stop sending armed bands of workers to collect grain. Let the peasants sell their grain to the state, to small distributors on an open market. Let them try to reestablish life in the countryside. So that's in the countryside. In the cities too, this whole kind of idea that you could kind of plan by commissar, kind of plan by just issuing orders, like we need this, we need this, we need this, was given a workshops were organized on kind of more systematic levels. They were forced to actually use accounting methods to figure out, are you minimizing the cost of production? Are you trying to maximize the output? Lenin once said, the principle of socialist accounting is the exact same principle as capitalist accounting. Small capitalists, the so-called net men, were allowed to act as middlemen between peasants and urban workers to open small enterprises. Foreign capitalists were even invited into the country to open up businesses. The whole idea was, let's take a break. So the NEP gave Soviet society a needed rest, but the country still struggled to even return to pre-war levels of economic activity. The USSR's extremely low level of industrial production left it vulnerable to foreign attack, and new industry was not developing at a sufficient rate to ever catch up with the West. Especially as you see the rise of fascism in Europe, Soviet leaders were concerned that they would be attacked and that they needed to be prepared. So a major debate developed. On the one hand, you had this guy, Preobrazhensky, who was an associate of Trotsky. He argued that in a developing socialist market, prices tended to converge on the cost of production, leaving little surplus left for reinvestment. And he basically said, well, you got to get the money somewhere. So he said, let's make the peasants pay for it by making them sell their grain at reduced cost and then take skimming off that to pay for investment. So the guy, Bukharin, who was originally part of the hyper left wing of the Bolshevik party, now led the right. He said, give the peasants a break, He said it was best to just let industrialization proceed in what he called a snail's pace in order to protect the prosperous peasants who were actually bringing Soviet society back to life. So I think what's interesting to note here is that both the Trotskyist left and the hard right in the Bolshevik Party, neither side actually wanted to do away with market relationship between the peasantry and the rest of society. They accepted that as a given. They thought that the NEP would have to last for decades. And that Soviets would take a long, long time for Soviet society to get to a point where that could be superseded. Meanwhile, there was another guy. You may have heard of. Stalin ran the Bolshevik Party's personnel office, and he used that over the period of the 20s to quietly build up and accumulate power in the party. He originally sided with Bukharin, but then once he defeated the Trotskyist opposition, he rapidly switched to the other side. So if you've ever read Trotsky, which I spent my 30s reading a lot of Trotsky, you'll often hear him complain about Stalin's zigzags. This was one of the big zigzags. So Stalin ended up pushing forward a policy much more radical and harsh than what was being advocated by the Trotskyists. In the countryside, Stalin carried out a massive forced collectivization program. The so-called kulaks, or rich peasants, were, whenever you do this, you're moving in a bad direction. The kulaks were liquidated as a class. Many of them forcibly deported to the east of the country. Peasants were forced to voluntarily form collective farms and voluntarily give up their animals to the collective farms. Many peasants responded to this by instead just slaughtering their cows, slaughtering their horses, and having a big feast rather than give them up. Throughout the country, these things called tractor stations were created. The idea behind the tractor stations was that you would have a station in the middle of a series of farms, and you would share out the tractors between those farms. But also each tractor station, in addition to the tractor mechanics, also had at least one secret policeman. So that's in the countryside. In the cities, Stalin enacted the first and second 5-year plans, which laid out insanely ambitious plans for rapid industrialization. His goal was to catch up with the West in 10 years. Enterprises were given extreme production targets and run under strict control. During the period of the 5-year plans, the final Soviet model of fully planned command economy developed. Planning was centralized, and planners used what was called material balances to anticipate the needs of new production. So that meant moving away from use of accounting methods to figure out, okay, is this enterprise doing well? Is it meeting society's needs? And moving instead to say, okay, how many tons of wheat are we producing? How many bushels of grain? How many miles of railway? How many kilowatts of electricity? And so what would happen is these plans would be developed at the top. There was one Soviet official, I think his name was, I can't pronounce his Georgian names, or Kinakidze, and he just had a bank of telephones on his desk. And he would spend his day calling up different steel mills and screaming at the plant managers there that they weren't meeting their production quotas and that they needed to get with the program. And so the orders would come from the top, and then it was up to the plant managers to carry out those orders and by any means necessary to boost production from them. So, the plans weren't carefully laid out plans, actually, for industrialization. It was more like chaos unleashed, with central commissars like Kinakidze cajoling, badgering, and threatening plant managers to hit their production targets. And the focus was really on, we have to build heavy industry. So consumer production lagged far behind the development of steel mills, dams, coal mines, and industrial workers, the supposed rulers of this new society, endured extreme privation, reduced rations, crappy housing, and often their sacrifice was for nothing, since many projects and kind of the speed of the plan were left unfinished. One of Trotsky's critiques of the plan was, Stalin would order the construction of a new factory. They'd build 9/10 of it, and then they move on to something else. Well, 9 tenths of the factory is often worth absolutely nothing. So all that work was for naught. So the development of this extremely centralized economy preceded the development of the full Stalinist system by several years. Forced collectivization and accelerated industrialization generated incredible resistance among the peasantry, among industrial workers, and inside the party. And Stalin's system of terror and purges developed largely as a result of that resistance to try to contain and defeat it. So let's talk now about some of the shortcomings of that system. We talked a little bit about its real achievements, but there were many very grave shortcomings. So despite the focus on industrialization, the system of planning by material balances encouraged a real conservatism among industrial managers. Planners focused on meeting the targets specified in the plan, not on developing new ideas or new techniques or new products. So the Soviets were very, very slow to develop the chemical industry. They were very, very slow to develop consumer goods. They were very, very slow to develop computers, even though there were actually some very promising early developments in Soviet computer science. Innovation only happened in the Soviet system when it was ordered from above, like the nuclear program and like the space program. Second, since the state was almost the sole producer of goods, Soviet economic managers developed a real, take it or leave it attitude towards their consumers. And we all know that, Soviet consumer products were crappy. And we also know that planners consistently shifted resources away from things like housing towards industrial development. But the biggest long-term problem in the system was the lack of quality of production in the production of actual production goods that would be used for industrialization. So capital good producers of machinery, because they had somebody on the phone saying, we need this new steel foundry, we need this new cement mixer, they would skimp on quality in order to hit their production target. They would skimp on things like installation, repair. They would skimp on things like spare parts. So often Soviet, railway planners would be stuck with locomotives that they couldn't actually run because no one was making the parts for them. So this lack of quality in production goods consistently undermined the Soviet drive for industrialization. Soviet planners also really lacked any effective way to measure the success of their plan. Production targets were often given in terms like weight that failed to give you any sense of the quality of the product. So, for example, the Soviet plan for furniture manufacture said that we will measure the success of this plan in tons. So Soviet furniture makers built extremely heavy furniture. Some sense of prices could have served as a useful way to measure production success, but Soviet officials consistently screwed around with the price system in order to win short-term popular gain. But the result wasn't happy people. It was empty shelves in the state-run stores and a consistent and pernicious black market. In fact, since Soviet planners didn't have a pricing system that was at all reliable to estimate the cost of production goods, Soviet planners and later planners in the Eastern Bloc would often use catalogs from capitalist countries to figure out how much is the steam engine worth, how much is the diesel motor worth. And Hungarian central planners would often joke that after the World Revolution, they'd have to let one country stay capitalist so that they could know how much everything was worth. So while this was happening in the Soviet Union, there was a major debate happening among economists about this very issue. It was what we call the calculation debate. And the issue was, can planners in a socialist economy actually figure out how much things are worth and make decisions about what to make? And the crisis of the Soviet system was actually predicted by the conservative economist Ludwig von Mises, who honed in on this particular problem, the inability of planners to know how much production goods were worth. And in his contribution to the so-called calculation debate of the 30s, Mises said that without prices, central planners would screw up both on the quality and quantity of the goods to make. So we're going to pause here and just talk a little bit about why mainstream economists are so enamored with prices and this idea that they have of what's called general equilibrium. Basically, mainstream economists start with the assumption that each one of us has in our head a set of preferences for things we like. You know, I like cheeseburgers more than I like pizza, and I like pizza more than I like beans and rice. But I can't have it all. I have a budget, and so I have to spend my money on those set of goods that are going to maximize what makes me happy. So when I pick one item over another because I have these scarce resources, economists say that was the opportunity cost of my decision. And producers behave similarly. They make a set of choices about what to produce, how to produce it, and how much to produce so that it'll maximize their profit. They aren't making enough profit in one industry, they'll go to another industry where there is profit. If it's cheaper to, if it's more efficient to use machinery to do one piece of production, but it's cheaper to hire someone to do it, they'll hire someone. And this choice of alternatives allows producers under this kind of mainstream theory of general equilibrium to choose the right production mix that's going to maximize their output. So as producers make these products and as consumers buy them, supply and demand kicks in. If there's a shortage, prices rise. Producers wanting a bigger profit produce more until the supply balances the demand. And according to mainstream economists, the price system creates an objective way to measure the set of economic choices that maximizes the utility of all the consumers and the profits of all the producers. In fact, they even assert that under what's called general equilibrium, where supply and demand are balanced for every production good, that everyone's utility is maximized for their good. So Mises said that without prices, this breaks down our central planners. And so that's where our buddy Oskar Lange steps in. So Lange, for those of you who read his extremely cheeky introduction to his piece, he said that socialist planners are going to actually put up big statues of Ludwig von Mises because to thank him for pointing out this glaring flaw in our plans. And then Lange begins to lay out a model of the socialist economy that uses a much stronger market mechanism than what was used in the Soviet system. So Lange starts out with the assumption that the means of production are largely owned by society, that not owned by individuals, but that there is still both a market for consumer goods with prices set by the fluctuation of supply and demand, and that socially owned consumer goods manufacturers are expected to minimize their costs and maximize their output. And but Lange, like Brzezinski, saw that a different method would be needed to set the prices for production goods, which is the problem that Mises really moved in on. Because he said that basically you're dealing here between two departments in the same state exchanging items between each other. So under Lange's model, a central planning board would first set a set of arbitrary prices for production goods. Here's the price of nails, here's the price of lumber, here's the price of cement, here's the price of steel. And if there's a shortage of one good, the board would raise prices for it until enough that good was being produced. If there was too much of another good, the board would lower that price until the market cleared. Now, in order for this to work, production goods manufacturers would have to be forced by state authorities to use strict accounting to minimize their costs. People's desire for agreeable work, with also, if you give them an incentive to work in more disagreeable places. So, in Lange's system, the total product of workers would be divided into three areas. One, wages. Two, a social dividend, like guaranteed housing, guaranteed health care, guaranteed education, and reinvestment. But despite all of this, despite the heavy use of both a market for consumer goods and a market for labor, and also a simulated market for production goods, Lange's whole model is based on the idea that that the productive means of production will be socially owned. In fact, I think Lange saw very presciently the fate that would await socialist governments that hesitated to socialize production. Here's a quote from him. A socialist government really intent upon socialism has to decide to carry out a socialization program at one stroke or to give it up altogether. The very coming into power of such a government must cause a financial panic and economic collapse. Therefore, the socialist government must either guarantee the immunity of private property and private enterprise in order to enable the capitalist economy to function normally, in doing which it gives up its socialist aim, or it must go through resolutely with its socialization program at maximum speed. Any hesitation, any vacillation and indecision provokes the inevitable economic collapse. Socialism is not an economic policy for the tenant. So another thing that Lange saw that I think is very significant is that despite his reliance on the market to plan much of a socialist economy, he saw that markets are extremely imperfect institutions. First, they're imperfect because the market under capitalist society, while it may maximize everyone's utility and their given budget, does not at all maximize social welfare. And there has to be a general redistribution of wealth among people for the maximum social welfare to be achieved. Second, we know that markets fail spectacularly in places like healthcare, where producers have a monopoly on information, often have a monopoly on care, and consumers have very poor information and very limited access. And so the idea that you, in an ambulance on the way to the hospital, can make like a rational choice about which emergency room you want to go to is just totally bogus. Another spectacular market failure is transportation, where the mass production of automobiles at the expense of effective public transportation has wrecked the livability of our communities and contributed to a huge environmental crisis. So Lange asserted that the Central Planning Board would have to play a very active role in the market. It couldn't just step back. It would have to, through regulation, deal with these market failures to make sure that that whatever market existed was heavily regulated in order to function. So we're going to zip back to Eastern Europe now for a little bit. So between the start of the Cold War and when Stalin died in 1953, the Soviets installed a series of centrally planned economies in the countries of the Eastern Bloc. But after Stalin died, there were some limited attempts at reform that I think are of note that we should consider. So first of all, in the Soviet Union itself, there's this fantastically, has anyone read Red Plenty by Francis Spucker? He calls it a non-fiction novel. And it's about this guy, Leonid Kantorovich, who was a Russian mathematician who was asked to take on the task of improving plywood manufacture in Russia. And so Kantorovich went to the plywood factory and they showed him around, they showed him the different machines for making plywood. And out of this, he developed a set of a system of planning that eventually got the name of linear programming, which basically says that if you want to optimize something, square feet of plywood, and you have a set of limited constraints to make that plywood, that there is a mathematical way to find the solution to that problem. Kantorovich's ideas were very slow to catch on the Soviet Union, but they actually spread like wildfire in the West, because in the West there was something to maximize profit. And so planners, so economic managers in the United States and Great Britain kind of developed these methods in the 40s and 50s. The Soviet military found out about it, and they were shocked to learn that the idea had come from within the Soviet Union itself. And so in the 1950s and 60s, in the period under Khrushchev, where there was kind of society. Kantorovich and other kind of reform-minded planners started to advocate for the use of what was called shadow prices to give them something to optimize so that they could use these mathematical methods to improve production. I think what's interesting about this, you should go read the Red Plenty book. It's really weird and great. I think what's interesting is that Kantorovich and his like are often given as an example of, oh yeah, we can actually, with a big building full of computers, figure out how to plan an economy. But it did rely, like Lange's model, it did ultimately rely on there being a set of agreed upon prices. Without that set of prices, it broke down. There were some other experiments that I think are of note. So in Poland, Oskar Lange, so during the 1930s, Joseph Stalin basically killed off the entire membership of the Polish Communist Party. So when it became clear that he was going to run Poland after the war, he realized he needed to rebuild the Polish Communist Party that he had destroyed. And one of the people he recruited to the new Polish Communist Party was Oskar Lange. And Oskar Lange returned to Poland and became one of the key central planners along with the other famous Polish socialist economist, Koleski. And they trained a new generation of Polish central planners. And after Stalin died, in 1956, there was a worker uprising in Poland, and a new government was installed that was relatively more liberal, that rejected the hyper-centralization of the Stalinist model. And there were some very interesting discussions among Polish economists about using a market and decentralizing planning decisions. There's a very, this guy, Vladimir Grush, wrote two very interesting books that were published in Poland in the 1960s about using decentralized planning methods in the economy that are worth looking at. And of course, the Yugoslavs went further than anyone else in developing an alternative to Soviet planning. They instituted really significant workers' control over production, and they heavily increased the use of the market to kind of mediate between different socially owned enterprises. It's hard for me to really assess the success of the Yugoslav model, mainly because the book I ordered on it hasn't arrived yet, but also because this all happened at the same time as the Yugoslavs were shunned by Stalin, and so they started to build up relationships with the West. And as part of building that relationship, they took on a lot of loans from the West, and eventually in the 80s, they found themselves in a position where they couldn't pay off those loans, and their economy disastrously collapsed. So now we're going to talk about today. And despite the weaknesses of the Soviet-style plan system, the idea of a fully centrally planned economy is having something of a comeback. I think has anyone read this yet? The People's Republic of Walmart? Anybody hear these guys on Chapo Trap House talking about their book? I actually think this is a really good book on the history of central planning. It has great chapters on the Soviet economy. It has great chapters on the calculation debate. But I think their central argument is the core is this. Their central argument is that companies like Walmart and Amazon are essentially planned economies like the Soviet Union, and they figured out how to do it. And all we need to do is, the workers of the world need to take over those algorithms, and then we too can plan our own economies. And I think there's a real problem there. If you heard the Chapo episode with the authors, you may have heard them joke about the number of different kinds of breakfast cereal and underwear and toothpaste that are available under capitalism. And I think whenever you hear a would-be socialist planner joke about consumer choice under capitalism, that should give you pause. Not just because socialism should not be Spartan and socialism should give us more and better things, but because we've seen that one of the real key flaws of the Soviet system was the lack good alternatives for production managers, good alternatives for production goods. And that was one of the real hindrances to the Soviet system. The second reason I think that their argument that you can't just take over the Walmart algorithm or the Amazon algorithm and put it to socialist use is that in those workplaces are just as tyrannical as anything we saw under Stalinism, and ruled with an iron fist. And I don't think that we can just take that over and expect it to work the same way. I think that the tyranny of that workplace is intimately connected with how closely it's organized. So what do? So based on the Soviet experience and these limited attempts at reform, socialists like Alf Nove and more recently Sam Gindin have sketched out a model of a decent and feasible democratic socialism that I think we should consider. So under their model, many industries, especially industries where markets work very poorly, like healthcare or transportation, would be organized centrally and run by boards jointly elected by the workers, consumers, and appointees of the government. Other enterprises, though, could be organized differently into smaller worker co-ops that would operate relatively autonomously. And individuals would even still be allowed to open up small businesses. The central planners would not tell the worker co-ops what to produce, and the worker co-ops and small businesses would be free to create new products, try new ideas, and compete with each other, and even compete with the big nationalized industries. Both the big centrally planned enterprises and the worker co-ops would have to buy their production inputs on the market and sell their output on the market. Except for those things that are producing the social goods, the aspects of the social dividend that Lange talks about, like healthcare or housing. Since the means of production would be publicly owned, they would have to rent their equipment and workspace from the state, and that rent would be one way that our democratic socialist society would socialize their surplus product and use it to centralize decisions about investment and centralize kind of the social dividend that we'd all be entitled to. Some surplus would still be kept by the worker co-ops to use as they see fit to expand staff or buy new equipment or raise wages. But another portion would be taken over by the state for the social dividend, and another portion would be taken over by the state to be centrally reinvested in priority industries like healthcare, housing, childcare, education, climate change mitigation. Worker co-ops would have to balance their books. They'd have to make payroll each week. They'd have to pay their rent. Some would be sure to fail. In fact, I think for a market mechanism to work, we would need some of them to fail. But with a strong social dividend and a national jobs guarantee, we can reduce that impact of failure on people who work for them and make it easier for them to move from a failing worker co-op to one that's succeeding. In both the big and small enterprises, workers would have a voice in how the enterprises run. But I think there's something, and this is something that Aldo talks a lot about, that even in a democratically run large enterprise, if two work groups have a disagreement, somebody's going to have to settle that for production to continue. And in the Soviet system, that person who decided was a centrally appointed bureaucrat. But even if that group of people who's making that decision, who's being that referee, is democratically elected, I think one group is going to get their way and one group is not. And so I think that's why we need to have a preference for when it makes sense organizing production in smaller worker co-ops rather than in big centralized enterprises. So none of this means that we don't need central planning. One major reason why we need central planning is because, going back as far as Brzezinski, he pointed out that under a socialist market, it becomes very hard to invest in production and expand production. So Sam Gendon, who's a Canadian socialist, wrote a very useful article in Catalyst recently about socialist planning, and he laid out a top 10 list of things that central planners would still do in a decentralized socialist economy. And I'm going to read some of those items. One, guarantee full employment, universal access to necessities and a living income. Two, settle the relationship between present and future consumption through determining the share of GDP to be allocated to investment. Three, allocating investment to sectors and regions which they in turn reallocate within their respective jurisdictions. Four, generating revenue from activities. Five, curbing impediments to society's solidarity and equality goals, not only across individuals and households, but across workplaces, collective sectors, and regions. Six, the constant development through educational institutions that work with popular functional skills and democratic and cultural capacities. Seven, governing the case of decommodification through the distribution of expenditures between collective and individual consumption. Eight, regulating the production user trade-off by influencing the share of productivity that goes to producing more versus producing the same with fewer hours of work. Nine, enforcing the stringent adherence to environmental standards. And 10, navigating the relationship with what will likely be a predominantly capitalist global economy. So I think what I like about the Alknove model and the Sam Gendon model is that it's not rigid. It allows a lot of room for experimentation, both from the top by central planners and from the bottom by workers organized in co-ops. So if it turns out one industry that was organized in worker co-ops is just not working well, then it would be up to the central planning board to reorganize it into a more centralized system. So finally, I just want to say, I've given up my dream of two big buildings where the central planners and their computers make all the choices for us. But does this mean we need to give up all of our socialist dreams? And I think some of them, yes. So fully automated luxury communism is not in our near-term future. We're nowhere near having the technology that can reduce the workday to a minimum and guarantee splendid luxury for all of them. We have so much work to do to stop catastrophic climate change, to rebuild our cities, to build a decent healthcare and educational system, to build decent housing for all. And we'll have that work to do for a long time in the future. I think a better goal is what the British socialist George Monbiot calls private sufficiency and public luxury. But I think there's another way that embracing market socialism and a decentralized planning model actually allows us to take some of these utopian dreams that you see in classical Marxism and make them really material. So Oskar Lange talks about how society's decision to create a social dividend is a real way to move from a set to the principle of distribution that Marx talks about, from each according to their ability to each according to their need. And it's a way for society to actually make that decision. How much of our social product can we actually decommodify and just guarantee to everyone? And that's something that we as a democratic socialist society could decide on and increase as our productive capacity increases. And I also think that this vision of organizing more and more social life around worker co-ops can mean a radical change, a radical increase in democracy in people's everyday lives. And even in enterprises that still need to be centrally organized, removing the myth of unemployment, removing the terrible capitalist masters, removing the kind of, and having a democratically elected group of workers and consumers shape the way that enterprises run will have a dramatic increase and improvement in people's lives. So I think we can have a decent world for all, where everyone has healthcare for all, where everyone has housing, where everyone has a guaranteed job, and we can still have nice socks. And I think that's a future we're fighting for.
Thank you, Dan. That was a very excellent overview. So we have some questions from our group, and then I figured we would just open it up for discussion. And some of the people who sent in good questions are here. So if I go through your questions participant in our group wanted to know, he says, Lange has not addressed in depth the composition and scope of this theoretical social planning board. What would you guess Lange has in mind? What would you propose is different? You kind of already touched on, but maybe you want to elaborate on it a little more.
Yeah, and I think this may get to some of the other questions about Lange as well. I think the ideal mix, the ideal way to, I think the Central Planning Board should be elected, should be an elected part of, elected by all of us in government. And I think where later folks have moved away from Lange in a positive way, both Alec and Sam Ginden, is by basically not saying that the Central Planning Board's role is to set prices, but more to kind of guide and shape the development of society. And I think that what we need is a thoroughgoing democratization of economic decisions. Democratization of the workplace through running the workplace through either worker co-ops or elected boards, and then Sam Ginden talks about kind of layers of democratic planning, where at every layer there's a democratically elected body that basically is making plans.
Yeah, so that kind of answers. Someone was curious about sort of, if we need a central planning board at all, or if we could do this without it. Do you think that's possible?
No, I don't think it's possible or desirable to do this without a central planning board, largely for the reasons that Sam Ginden outlined. I think, first of all, I think you need kind of a central government to decide what's the social dividend going to be. I think you need a central government to decide what's going to be the division in society between how much we reinvest in the future, how much is in the social dividend, how much is in wages. And I think, from Pre-Brzezinski on, it's been observed that kind of the socialist market system in equilibrium ends up setting prices that do not include enough for reinvestment. So there's always going to be a need for a central body to kind of allocate money that society itself can use.
So under this system, given the potential robustness of the social dividend, something that came up in our discussions was, how are we going to compel people to work? If their housing is guaranteed, if their healthcare is guaranteed, what's in it for them?
This is a real my uncle at Thanksgiving question. I think that that question of compulsion is ideally one for us as a society to make. And we make that decision democratically by deciding how big and what's in the social dividend. And the more that's in the social dividend and the less that's in the wage fund, the less the compulsion there will be. And I think that would be a role of central planners to kind of judge how much compulsion is needed in this system and how much is not. I think that the basics, guaranteed health care, guaranteed housing, guaranteed child care, those are things that are just, that's our program, and it's our program because having those things means such a meaningful increase in everyday human freedom in our lives. And that's why it's such a central part of our program. But we do still live in a world of scarce resources. I think we have, as a DSA, have decided we want to set aside enough of society's resources to guarantee enough of those things for every person's life. But that still leaves room for us to say, okay, if you want more, if you want better things, we will guarantee you a job. Some jobs may make more than others. There does not necessarily have to be an equality of wages. And, you know, and that's how, and some people will choose to work more to have. I think that's how.
So you're saying I can't have a yacht under socialism? Okay. I guess another thing that came up in our discussion that I'm curious about is the Scandinavian models. I guess I'd like to kind of leave it open because in some ways they seem to contradict a lot of Oskar Lange's vision of a socialist economy, specifically this like one fell swoop or one fell swoop idea that he comes up with, which is that you need to do this fast and you need to do it immediately because otherwise you're never going to be able to do it at all. And that's not the case. And so I was curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, there may be others in the room who are more expert on the Scandinavian experience than I am. I would say, in my readings on the social democratic models, very early social democrats in Sweden decided to minimize nationalization as part of their program. And they consistently chose to prioritize expanding the welfare state over nationalization. So they basically gave up, I would say, not gave up the goal of socialization, but basically decided we'll have a welfare state at the expense of moving forward. It's interesting, the two countries that actually moved more aggressively toward the socialization of the means of production after World War II were Great Britain and Austria, where in Austria you had a very, very significant section of the economy taken over by the state at the same time as the Social Democrats made huge gains in welfare.
And this is more of a political question, but since you are a member, how do we convince people that this all works, like lots of graphs? How do you do it?
Well, I think that first of all, we have to reckon with, I think, even though the Soviet Union is a long way in the rearview mirror, it's most folks' only idea of a really existing socialist society. So I think, first of all, we really have to assert that that we want to do things differently if we intend and that is not our model. Second, I think that we need to show that that our model can actually work in a way that's desirable to most people. And I think that's where this kind of model of kind of increasing democracy in the workplace can play a big role. And finally, I think we need to show that I'm interested to hear other people's thoughts on that question.
Yeah, let's open it up for discussion. Questions for Dan, comments?
I think one of the people that we look at videos, we have meetings, have different folks on it, draw meetings like that, where we understand things. Shouldn't be big cooking, meeting on it. on about, why we're not advocating for that. This is not Alexander, but what is a co-op exactly? Because I know there's kind of
Yeah, so, and I'm using the phrase kind of loosely. So, a workers' co-op is a workplace where each worker there owns a share of the workplace and has a share in the decision-making of the workplace. So the most kind of famous example of worker co-ops is in the Basque country of Spain. There's a town called Mondragon, where there's basically the whole town and industries around it are organized by a series of worker co-ops that manufacture appliances and run different aspects of social life. And there the worker co-op has turned into kind of a series of worker co-ops. So often I think that there is a vision put forward where you basically slowly transition to socialism by building a worker co-op here, a worker co-op here, and you slowly expand that until they take over production. I'm not advocating that. I don't think that works. But I do think that it's a good model to consider for after a large, massive political movement forces the transformation of society.
How do you deal with, the reaction of whatever parties may still exist? And how would you navigate that? I mean, right. I mean, I expect you to somehow answer what you would do in that situation now, but
I can certainly imagine that possibility, given the current state of the trade union. However, I have to hope that, if we have if the flowering of socialism in the United States continues, there will be such a kind of flowering of the trade union movement that a lot of the kind of most reactionary emerging elements of that. But there's no guarantee of that, and I do think it's a mistake for socialist government leaders to basically say that unions can't be unions. I think that is a bad direction.
You had mentioned that there's going to be some need for some degree of planning to mitigate the worst effects of climate change. So I just want to know, thinking in the near term, what planning mechanisms do you think would be worth fighting for as a part of the Green New Deal? And if there's any disconnect between what's desirable and what's politically feasible?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the starting point is that if folks haven't read the 14-page memo that AOC produced on the actual elements of the Green New Deal, it's actually a really worthwhile document to read through. I think it lays out in pretty good detail the steps that are necessary. I think there are kind of a few different angles here. I think one angle from a social strategy point of view is that just like Corbyn is doing in the UK, we need to push for nationalization of the energy system, and we need to push for a nationalization of the transportation system, the transportation cities. And I think those are areas where kind of a more centralized model would be necessary. Especially with transportation, I think we've seen that that relying on individual market choice. I know that auto companies have made individual market choice kind of a joke, but relying on that to make the decisions about how we move around in society leads to extremely bad outcomes. We need to kind of have a centralized decision about how we're going to actually rebuild the transportation infrastructure. I think the other aspect of that, though, is that And this is why some central planning would be needed even in an economy where many workplaces are reorganized and work co-ops. You know, every workplace would have to think about how to reorganize production to fit within kind of a, you know, to meet kind of like our ecological needs. And so without a central authority, there's no way of saying to those workplaces, okay, these are the steps you need to take. A really good, I think a really good book on this subject is this guy, George Monbiot, a British socialist, wrote a book called Heat, where he basically walks through the British economy and lays out the steps each sector of the economy would need to take in order to reduce carbon emissions by 90%. I think that's excellent.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming here. This was really great. One thing I kind of noticed throughout what you said today is an attempt to kind of impose socialism from on high often ends up in an authoritarian situation. And the opposite, I think, is corporate power coming about through massive democratic institutions established by workers themselves. Can you maybe talk about how that might come about and what you see the role of workers' power and things like that, establishing socialism? This is what we're talking about.
I mean, I can say a little bit about it. I think there are other folks in this room who could give a more rounded answer. I mean, I believe, what I said earlier, that I think that socialism is really only going to come about through the coming to power of a mass socialist party that wins office, and then in the process of winning office will probably face enormous challenges, and then working people will have to kind of mobilize in mass to defend that government. And I think, going back, I think the one decent model we have is the Chilean model, where in Chile, socialists formed a coalition, they won the presidency, and they started to carry out a series of socialist reforms of the economy and started building housing for the unhoused and providing free milk to mothers, and the amount of resistance they met was overwhelming. And so workers throughout Chile organized councils and bodies to defend the socialist government, and basically in the process of that, Chilean society was revolutionized. And if you haven't seen it, the documentary The Battle of Chile, it's kind of like an on-the-ground look at that process, and it's really worth looking at. I think one problem in this, if I could just make one little tangent, I think one problem in the socialist movement since 1917 is that it's been framed in terms of, well, do you want revolution or do you want reform? Are you a Bolshevik or are you a social democrat? And I think that has really kind of, the Bolsheviks after 1917 had to promote world revolution because their country was in imminent danger of being destroyed. I think that's really kind of warped how we view social change, and I really think we should look at some of the few socialist theorists since then to try to break through that, like Ralph Miliband pointed out, there can be like a democratic road to socialism that does not mean like we're only aiming for an increased welfare state. We are aiming for a society where capitalism ends.
We'll take 2 more questions. Yeah.
Okay. I always hear the argument the right way how socialism has failed in Venezuela. They will call it a shithole. Okay? So if you want the United States to be a shithole, become like Venezuela. And I've always told these right-wingers, look, mismanagement is mismanagement. If you ever read what happened in Venezuela was they got rid of all the people that ran this oil company there, and they replaced them with party hacks who didn't know what the hell they were doing, which happens in the capitalist system I explained. And then there's the 800-pound gorilla in the room, U.S. sanctions. So you couple that with mismanagement, then that would cause the problem. And a lot of these right-wingers just don't quite understand this. What would be your reply to this, to that question?
I think the two answers you've given are a good reply to the problems in the world. Sorry.
Any last thoughts about this question?
Have you read Oskar Lange's Socialist Manifesto? No, until my two readings. Okay. Yeah, I was just interested in the idea thoughts on this. He tries to like flesh out maybe how some sort of an economy might work. You got it for me now.
Awesome. Well, let's give it another round of applause. So we are probably going to head to the bar after this, probably Rose Gallery. So if you guys want to hang out with us after, we'd love to chat. Also, some announcements. So first, this Saturday, we're going to be doing our first Bernie canvas, which is really exciting. And
Jefferson.
Square Park, 9:12 noon on Saturday. Thank you guys. And it's on our website for those of you who don't have it.
One more time.
Okay, noon Saturday, Jefferson Square Park in South Philly. Bernie Sanders for president.
Bernie's gonna be there.
And then also we're going to be continuing our summer lecture series, and next Monday, Adana Usmani will be coming to talk about mass incarceration. For those of you who came to our school, we actually read his piece in Catalyst. So it'll be a really exciting opportunity for us to ask him some of our questions about that piece and more broadly about mass incarceration. Any other? That's it. The Bernie debate is also going to be on Tuesday, and there will sure to be a party to watch.
Probably in this room.
Probably in this room, so stay here until then.